Hello, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Allie Duveen, the event manager at Babel Street. Babel Street is the trusted technology partner for the world's most advanced identity intelligence and risk operations. The Babel Street Insights platform delivers advanced AI and data analytics solutions to close the risk confidence gap. Now, in today's webinar, Scaling Trust in Finance and Payments Using AI, you're going to learn why truly knowing the customer is critical to understanding risk and engendering trust in customers and the market. You're also going to learn how AI helps turn the problem of ever-growing data into an opportunity to optimize and automate the identity resolution of entities involved in transactions at a global scale. Please feel free to ask questions throughout the webinar. However, Catherine will be answering all questions at the end of the presentation. So let's jump in. With us today is Dr. Catherine Havasi, an AI scientist from before artificial intelligence was a globally known technology and before the general public became aware of how much it influences business and impacts us every single day. Dr. Havasi earned her PhD in computer science from Brandeis University and co-founded the AI companies Luminoso and Delang. She was a research scientist at the MIT Media Lab for over 10 years, and she is also the Chief of Innovation and Technology Strategy here at Babel Street. So welcome, Catherine. Thanks for doing this today.
Thanks. I'm really happy to be here. I think I'm going to talk a little bit about how to scale trust and identity. I think something that's really exciting is we've sort of finally reached a point where the real potential of AI is something that's talked about and known in every household. You know, AI is no longer a science fair project, but it's become an integral part of the operations of pretty much every institution. And instead of being something that's relegated to the innovation department, and I can say things about the innovation department because I run it, it's become something that's the fabric of applications that people use to deliver value in every institution every day. And we don't even think about it anymore. AI is finally ubiquitous. Remember at the turn of the millennium where, you know, if you were trying to download an analyst report or select, you know, the industry your company was in, there was a selection for internet, if folks are old enough to remember that. And internet was a vertical, right? I think now it would be silly to say is internet a vertical because internet is part of every single thing we do. And I think where we are right now is in the same inflection point for AI. I think AI is about to become part of an expected part of the way business is done all over the world and throughout every industry. And I think that's a very important transformation. At the same time, our marketing is changing. Geopolitical risks have become something that no company can ignore. And the rapid move to digital transformation has created an environment where every company is global. And our verticals are increasingly expected to being able to manage that risk in real time, the scalability that everyone is struggling with today. There is an expectation by regulators, governments, and businesses that they use AI to extract valuable insights, discover connections, and understand identity in order to manage this risk. And understanding the true identity of entities involved in a transaction is both a data problem and an opportunity. As the global scale of payment grows, understanding who is being transacted with can be more of an issue of more uncertainty and less time. The ability to know who is really somebody is critical to understanding your risks and engendering trust. But in order to do that, you have to sort through an ever-increasing torrent of information and transactions. It can be tempting to approach this as simply a numbers problem, but handling these large scales of data quickly and carefully requires going beyond false positive reduction and automation to thinking about things in a deeper way. So how can we maintain onboarding speed while understanding identity and reducing risk? This is the real key question here. And I think one key part about that is really understanding identity at scale. We think about identity as names, both of organizations and of individuals, and that global complexity is an increasing problem. As organizations and corporations become more global, we have to deal with a lot of name cultures and a lot of different scripts and ways of writing, as well as many different ways of doing things like abbreviations or even conventions. So if you think about it, there are a lot of different ways to say a name that we all think about all the time. Think about a former president of America. You can have, there's a lot of different ways to write that name and to understand it. And making mistakes here can be very costly, and they happen to everyone. So for example, Apple itself, the large computer company, was in trouble with a sanctions violation for doing transaction with this company right here. They failed to identify them because the case was different and because there was punctuation in weird places in the name of the organization. And, this is basically an issue for case management, but here they had to pay, what is for most of us a pretty hefty fine for that. Although it's actually quite small in the size of some of these fines, right? So this happens over and over and over again. And every morning I get up, I listen to the financial news, and pretty reliably, someone's been fined for something, a violation in one way or the other in identity. So not only do we have to be faster, we have to be more accurate, and putting those two pieces together can be really difficult and tough. So I'm going to start out and talk a little bit about best practices and recommendations on how we can work within the identity space in order to maximize efficiency while still maintaining accuracy. I think the first thing here is really being able to find the balance, right? So again, accuracy is really important. Speed is really important. Where do we want to fall along that spectrum, right? There is a big push right now to real-time finance, real-time transactions, real-time payments. There's how far are we going to go along that line, and what is the art of the possible at that speed? So it really becomes a question of that, as well as of building your own gold standard data set or finding one out there, being able to really benchmark and understand how accurate you need to be across your data and make measurable changes and see the impact of those changes. Something that's going to be incredibly critical from now forward inside of artificial intelligence is explainability, right? We all hear a lot about large language models and ChatGPT, but it's going to become a real imperative for computers to be able to explain why they made the decisions they made, in order for regulators to understand those decisions at scale. And a lot of more advanced AI techniques, we don't understand explainability yet. So building that in on the very base level becomes incredibly important. Really understanding why these decisions were made, being able to explain them, and building that transparent trust is really the key to closing the risk confidence gap, right? It's not going to just do something for a reason we don't understand and we can't audit later. It becomes really important in building one of these programs. I mentioned the speed of payments earlier, and this is a big conversation topic in the field right now. And almost every part of compliance and risk management across many different industries is sort of going through a revolution, moving from something that you did maybe on onboarding or something that you do a rudimentary check to something that is faster and more continuous. And this is everything from thinking about continuous KYC inside the AML space, down to continuous monitoring for security in public sector applications. So one of the things that is important is, making the leap towards making the speed up leap in a way that's really sustainable. So making each increment of speeding up be something that makes sense and is well understood before continuing to go faster, right? And don't jump from 0 to 60. That doesn't work so hot, right? Really understanding what that means is something that's been more of a proven value add. So what are the key problem features in this domain and identity? Well, what are the things that we need to look for? We've talked a lot about accuracy. There's a lot out there. This is what people talk about when they say reduce false positives. I talked earlier about the amount of data in this field. Reducing false positives is key because you can't just scale with people anymore. As we get more and more checks and more people on various lists, be it OFAC, be it sanctions, be it PEPs, it doesn't really matter, right? There's just a lot of people we need to check against. And with world events the way they are, that's not going to go down anytime soon. So we really need to remain accurate while reducing false positives, because simply scaling people to look at false positives isn't going to work. At the same time, we talked earlier about false negatives being a problem. So it really does feel like a catch-22. We can think about methods that are used like key methods, which produce high recall, but get a lot of obvious non-matches that have these false positives as being one side, whereas a full ML approach might reduce false positives, but might let other things slip through. One thing that we have to deal with is name variations, right? Again, everything's becoming more global, so we really have to understand different parts of the naming scheme and the different things that we have to understand so we're not surprised, right? If we want to look at corporations, we're not going to see this often, but is Mickey D's, McDonald's, but we're also going to see all kinds of nicknames and phonetic spellings depending on your use case in payments. Obviously, it's just going to be about matching people, but in certain other use cases, do we have a situation where there might be a forgery here? Or do we have a situation where there might be an OCR error? How can we take those things into account and build models that predict those? As well as being able to, understand things got swapped, they're in the wrong order, did we drop the nickname? Did we drop the middle name? Is there phonetics within the scripts? So all of these global name conventions become incredibly important. I think it's really, the study of names is actually really, really interesting. It's called onomastics, and it's really about how the culture of names work. And as we become a more global society, and as many parts of the world really start thinking about not necessarily always using Western names or Western naming conventions, especially in APAC, this is becoming even more important every day. And again, working in multiple languages at Babel Street, we are really, I'm a linguist by training. I'm kind of a language geek. We're really here to help companies work in a lot of these languages, and we're adding new ones every day. So right now we're working on adding both Hindi and Malay to our software. So both of those are on the roadmap as well, based on economic indicators in the countries that based on economic indicators in those countries. Another key feature for us is really how many parts of a name or how many parts of identity do you have, right? So often we have more information than just somebody's name. We can have their address, we can know something about their nationality or their date of birth. If we're doing a KYC situation, we often have a lot of information on somebody, and we can use all those pieces of knowledge to make a better weighted guess on whether or not two individuals are the same individual. Sometimes, if we're matching against a list, we don't have a lot of information on the person on the list, but we can take into account what we know to have a holistic match score. And we can do that for a lot of things that are beyond names and organizations, even things like vehicles and vessels and email addresses and other sorts of things that you would run into when you're working in identity. As I mentioned earlier, I think explainability is number 5. It's really key here. Being able to not be a black box, right? And I think as we see AI regulation move forward, it's going to be imperative for us to be able to continue to harness the power inherent in AI, that we're able to explain what we're doing and we're able to show that it's fair. And I think having a human-centered AI design that does that, and I'll talk a little bit about this later, as well as empowers our analysts to do their job better, is going to be the key to adding advanced technology while still maintaining regulatory and government friendliness towards AI. So with all of those pieces together, I want to take just a brief moment to talk a little bit about how our R&I product works. So we're a little bit different. Our name indexer has really 2 passes, right? And this is something that's very much our thing. The first pass that we have is really about recall. So we want to be very, very fast. And in order to do that, we do a first pass that pulls a wide net out there and approximates what the really smart sort of deep learning engine is going to do, and picks a bunch of different candidates and says, okay, we are only going to deep dive on those candidates so we can be really fast, but also we're not going to miss anything. And the second path is that precision. It brings down all of those candidates and says, which ones of these are actually likely to be a match and at what probability and why. So the first one goes out there, it grabs everything that it possibly can grab. So it grabs all of these, it looks against the thing, and then the watch list, it grabs all of these name candidates and it goes forward with that. And the second part here is going to be to score, right? So Now that we've gone through our second pass, we're able to bring together our ensemble method with many different pieces of machine learning to do phonetic scoring, to do token deletion, to work with international and, in places progressive ideas of gender, nicknames, all of these things in order to build a ranked list of match scores and come up with our risk scoring engine will come up with a score and we'll be able to explain that score. So for example, here we can say Jesus is, Chewy is a nickname for Jesus. These are probably the same thing for Alfonso. Alfonso here is clearly a misspelling of Alfonso here. They've dropped Lopez. Maybe they have no idea how Hispanic names work, and Diaz is a match. So we're able to put together the different parts of our ensemble system. We say there's a nickname. There's clearly a phonetic match between Alfonso and Alfonso. They deleted a token. They deleted an important token for this type of name. So that's a little bit of a penalty. The last name is an exact match. So we're able to really break that apart and say, hey, there's this token alignment. There's these phonetic matching through our phonetic matching machine learning algorithm. And we're able to make that conclusion. And everything that we do with that system is very configurable. So we have a lot of different parameters to make sure the system behaves exactly like you need it to. I think there's a real obvious question here. Where does the future lie for advanced artificial intelligence? Right now, ChatGPT, in case you didn't try, is not very good at name matching. It's certainly not very fast. It's not really its specialty. And beyond that, it's not really explainable and it tends to hallucinate and have other problems. So how are we going to use these advanced large language models in regulated industry? At Babel Street, my team is in the process of rolling out a conversational user interface based on, for doing semantic search of open documents like news and other sorts of information based on ChatGPT. And really where the entire LLM industry is going is by using different systems with different strengths to work together. Sometimes this is called a hydro model or an agent model. So the idea is the conversational interface works with you to talk in a way that's, really understandable, but then it will call out to explainable and in some places more predictable models to be able to do different parts. So instead of having one monolithic model where knowledge comes in one end and intelligence comes out the other, what you have is a bunch of models working together to build the best system that they possibly can to deliver insights in an explainable, regulatory compliant way that's not a big black box, but still gives you that conversational flow and is still able in the long term to partner with your analysts and give them a big boost. Now, obviously, that's not this year, that's not next year, but that's where this kind of thing is going with using advanced AI in a regulated industry. I think it's really interesting, and I think it's a really exciting future. And it's a little bit about how our brains work, right? Our brains are not one monolithic thing doing one monolithic piece, right? There are a bunch of different agents that work together to accomplish things. And that's what we're going to need to build to solve the really tough problems today. So with that, I hope that was helpful. Thank you so much for listening in. And please let me know if there are any questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Catherine. I'm sure everybody here learned so much. If you have questions, definitely now is the time to enter them in the chat. We do have a couple already, and I see more coming in now. So definitely get those in. All right, first question. Won't we be able to just ask a large language model to match identities for us?
So I think one of the things about large language models is that although we're really exploring how to use large language models and doing everything from sort of image, obviously image on one side to large models, but things like gene editing and things like that, they're really geared towards large unstructured documents, right? And so many fielded records are not necessarily where their strength is right now. And I think that's really where AI is going, right? We've proved that there's something great right now with AI, but what we need to do is we need to continually use the right model and the right technology to solve different parts of the AI ecosystem and different problems, right? We have a lot of powerful models. They can all work together to solve problems, but we need to use the right tool for the job and not just use a large language model as a hammer for every tool. Also, speed is going to be a big problem in the short term and expense.
Got it. Shouldn't everyone use the same name matching model? Why should anyone customize?
So I think when we do have a lot of customization, and I think there's really two sides to that. One is that every organization and institution has a different risk profile, and that's because they have different clientele and different situations, right? And really understanding and developing and mirroring the risk model that works for your organization is a really key part of using technology to solve compliance problems. I mean, none of us probably on this call need to be told to involve compliance and risk committees early on in the process. But being able to make sure that your technology can bend to whatever you need is a really key part of bringing one of these systems to production successfully.
Awesome. We often have to make a trade-off between speed and accuracy when both are important. Can AI help us achieve both?
I think that's a really good question. And I mean, I think we're increasingly, one of the things we're building here is a no code, low code interface called Studio that helps people set up their name and identity matcher. And I think that's really helpful. But where we want to be going is something that allows people to get AI to help them set the parameters that fit their particular situation. And I think that's something where we want to be moving in that direction. Right now, that's something that's really interesting for the industry, but being able to visualize the effects of what you're doing and how that impacts the metrics that matter, I think is really important.
Is there an API version?
Yes. Good question. I mean, deployment question. Okay. So we work with Elastic as well as standalone and also with Solar and potentially other platforms that are in the works right now and I don't want to talk about yet. But absolutely, this is something that can go on premise. It can go in a very secure environment. We do well over 500 million name checks a day, probably definitely closer to 700 or a billion even. And some of those are in very secure environments, right? We are part of sort of the global logistics and flight. You go into Heathrow, you put your passport down and you go through. That's all something we work with. So we're almost certainly able to deploy wherever and however you need.
Great. How can this be used for monitoring or screening transactions, particularly across borders?
Yeah, I mean, I think absolutely that's a big question that's a big potential application right now for us. I think as payments becomes more global and becomes more cross-border, more of this kind of screening is going to be needed and explainable.
How do you think LLMs will affect this industry?
I mean, I think LLMs, as I said, we're using LLMs right now, and I think LLMs are a great tool that are going to make a lot of things in the greater compliance space easier. It's going to make it easier and faster to ingest data. I've also done some work in my career in customer experience. And when we started doing more advanced AI automation and customer experience, one of the key things was that some of the metrics around speed moved away. And we ended up being able to deep dive on problems that really mattered or customers in a gray area, like somebody who had their wallet stolen in a foreign country or something like that. And I think we're going to be approaching something similar in compliance where we really give our analysts superpowers to get through a lot of material very quickly. But when there's a true gray area now and you need to really deep dive in, being able to both work with the data in order to facilitate that, but also have the time that it would take to do that deep dive is going to be really transformative to getting to the bottom of making smarter decisions.
Great. How configurable is this?
I think we ended up covering this a little bit. It's really important to be able to be super configurable. We have a lot of different parameters in the system so that we can match the risk profile that you might have.
Okay. And the last question, time constraints, we need to call it pretty soon. How can we do quality control of all the online data we find about a person? There is certainly more than one Jesus Diaz out there.
Yes, and that is hard, right? And I think when we're working with, this is mostly a structured record matcher. At Babel Street, we also look at unstructured information as well, pulling information from news, etc. And the idea of unstructured identity resolution is a really big, interesting, thorny AI problem. A lot of it is going to involve context and really understanding what's going on in an article or in information about a person to figure out whether or not that's a match for that individual. You know, is this an individual who lives in Texas? Do we know that about them? Does that mean that they're less likely to have gotten arrested in Sri Lanka? Do we know that they're a violin maker and that there might be another person who is a violin maker, who is not a violin maker? And so we can sort of build profiles for individuals and try to figure out who is who. And I think that's all something that we are really excited about on the unstructured half of the business.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Catherine,
Thank you as
for
well.
doing this. And thank you to everybody who participated and your questions. If your question did not get answered, we will definitely answer them by email. And if you have any additional questions or you'd like to talk about your screening, onboarding, or transaction monitoring needs, please visit babelstreet.com/contact and reference this webinar in the comments. So bye, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.